Here,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second episode of the Medicine Mermaid. We are your hosts, Naomi and Naomi. And in this episode, we will be exploring womb initiations, deconstructing common myths, redefining our symptoms, and embracing bio-individuality. Now, this is one of probably many episodes where we bring in the womb, and we already have a few planned out. But in this episode, we'll specifically be focusing on navigating our symptoms, navigating the things that come up in our wombs, in our bodies, in our pelvises, in our feminine space, and how we navigate them, how we have approached them within our own lives and with the women that we work with, and hopefully opening up this space for more depth, for more nuance, for all of the shades of gray in between. Because what often happens, I find, is that this conversation around the womb and womb health can often get really pigeonholed. It can be talked about in a really black and white way. And I'll speak for myself. I have felt very constricted a lot of the time. And you'll hear in our stories today how we've navigated these myths and how we've had to break them down within our own lives and find our version of truth. So, before we get started, I wanted to just address any of the women who are in this space, who are womb healers, who are devoted to the feminine, because something that I myself have felt a lot, and I see a lot of my sisters saying, kind of like a limiting belief. And it feels important to address this here. A limiting belief that I often hear is, oh, well, there's so many women who work with the womb. There are so many women who online are talking about womb healing and womb healing and womb healing. Like, what do I have to share that's unique? Or what is it that I have to share that brings something new to this conversation? There's so many women. And I hope that what you take away from this is that there's actually not enough women, I believe, who are talking about womb healing, who are in this field. I believe that even though womb healing arts are ancient, hundreds of thousands of years old, if not more, it has disappeared for a long time and it's reemerging, and a lot of us are pioneering this field once again. And if we look at there being 4 billion women on the planet, right? Even the thousands of Instagram womb healers that we see, I personally don't believe are enough. Wherever there's a coffee shop, there should be a womb healer. So if you are in this field, if you're listening to this, if you work with the womb, with the feminine, and you feel constriction, you feel any kind of limiting story of, but there's already so many, so why would I enter this world? Why would I continue to share in this? I hope that this actually opens up so much space and how important this field is. And yeah, I hope that this episode, right, with our experiences, with our education, makes you feel more space. It makes you feel more open, and that you don't actually hear rules and obligations and shoulds and should nots, but that you hear the nuance and the complexity, and that this creates softness in your body and
and for
opens you up to a new way of relating to your body. Want to add anything, Naomi, before we get started?
I agree with every word, and yeah, I hope that you all feel that like permission slip or that resonance, or you know, I always dreamed of having a podcast that was like women telling their stories because of this, because when we do that, we get to be like, oh my God, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. Or like suddenly there is like some kind of permission suddenly coming up of like, oh, I can be my own individual and like have shared common, like experiences. It's more it's like normalized suddenly, right? That like, yeah, there's no should or shouldn't. There's no black and white in this. There's no perfection in this. So I'm excited to dive in.
Yay. So, we are going to be exploring a few different common myths that we hear within the womb healing world. And we're going to break each of them down, but just to share what we'll be talking about today. So, myth one, having symptoms in the womb is a sign of something wrong. Myth number two, having the perfect cycle. Myth three, should I be bleeding on the full moon or the new moon? Myth number four, having womb symptoms equals I have a cold womb. And myth number five, should I be cycle syncing? I described all of these myths as questions because they are in fact, right? These are conversations that are often posed as rules and regulations, but we're bringing them back to you as a question because one of them, they may actually be truth for you, and that's actually okay. We're not here to actually say no, they're wrong. They're not, there's no truth in them. It's actually to bring more to the conversation. So we'll start with myth number one, which is having symptoms in the womb is a sign of something wrong. If there's any myths that I have had to break down the most, it's probably this one because throughout my womb journey, right, since my first bleed at 12 years old, I have navigated severe dysmenorrhea, low back pain, things like bacterial vaginosis and STDs and UTIs. And these are things that currently still deal with and navigate. And so I don't speak from, I've completely healed myself, but I speak from the position of navigating symptoms often and how do I approach them? Because having grown up, at least for myself, in with a background of two medical doctors, the allopathic system of medicine was how I was raised. And whether it was the womb or whether it was just the body in general, just having a symptom equaled something's wrong. Let's fix it. Oh, let's go to the doctor. Oh, let's take a medication. Now, that's not true for every woman. A lot of women that I speak to, they navigate symptoms in a completely different way. Their psyches are programmed in a completely different way. But I think we can all agree that the Western medical model as a whole tends to frame symptoms, especially symptoms in the female space, as a problem that needs to be fixed. And the gynecological specialty, we can call it, within medicine, even though they understand a lot about diagnostics and a lot about identifying which exact bacteria or virus or parasite or which organ is it that's growing whatever cyst, they're very good at identifying and diagnosing, but they, I believe, lack in the ability to understand the full landscape, the full ecology of a female body beyond the
Yeah,
physical.
right?
Exactly. The emotional, the spiritual, the mental, it's still seen as secondary, as holistic, as after. After, take the medicine and then go talk to your holistic Reiki practitioner, right? It's seen as it's seen as less than, inferior. And maybe that's not true for every female's experience with the gynecologist, but I believe a large majority. So having had to navigate all of these symptoms throughout my life, and I could record a podcast episode on, you know, each of them. I won't share all the details with you today, but I believe that the main one that has influenced me and has brought me transformation is my period pain. So ever since my first bleed at 12 years old, I have had chronic period pain. And at first, my mom just gave me pills from Brazil and she said, "Here, take these." And so I would take them and I would take them and I would take them every time I got my period and I felt the pain. I would just take the pills. I didn't think twice about it. When I was about 18, 19, and I was, leaning more into holistic, natural treatments, I was feeling kind of the ick of the doctors. That's when I started saying, you know what, I'm not actually going to use that approach. I actually want to not take the medication. I don't want to suppress my pain. I want to understand the root cause of my pain. So that led me on a whole journey of exploring herbalism and exploring somatics and emotional release. And it took me about 7, 8 years to find some degree of resolution. But throughout that time of me deciding, no, I don't want to be self-medicating anymore. I want to find the root cause because this is treating a symptom but not getting to the root cause. That put me on a path of receiving a lot of projection from my environment while I was on my bleed. Because for me, day one would be hell. Whatever I had going on, I would have to cancel, whether it was school, whether it was work, whether it was a client, I would have to cancel. Sometimes I would wake up at 4 in the morning with my pain, and I would be kind of in this half sleeping, half pain trance state. I would put myself under the shower um, because warmth helped me. But I would be in so much pain, crying and screaming in the shower that oftentimes in my trance state, I would text my clients and cancel my appointment for the day, all my appointments for the day. I would wake up and forgot that I did that and then see that my whole schedule had been canceled. I needed that, but I lost many clients in the process. And so it was a very difficult journey of navigating that pain. But I wanted to find the root. So despite that, I still persisted. And what I would hear from my mother was, "Oh, you just wanna be a victim. You're choosing to live in pain. You're choosing not to take medication or get the injection, which is very common in Brazil to get an injection to relieve period pain.
I've
You're
heard
just
of that.
choosing." I know, I had never heard about it until I came to Brazil, but there is an injection that you can get. Um, yeah, you're just choosing to be in pain. You're just choosing to be in pain. And I didn't feel that support. But I was very adamant in finding relief naturally. And even though it took a long time, what I found was that it was my mother who was actually the root cause, right? And not just my mother's projections when I was bleeding, but that was an example of how she always was in all aspects of my life. A lot of dismissal and a lot of denial and a lot of patronization and things like that. And so once I finally started healing my relationship to my mom and grieving the mother that she was and the mother that she wasn't, and really giving my inner child space to recognize the woman that is my biological mom, and I started to grieve her and grieve my childhood and cry, that's when my period pain started to go away. And it did. When I was about 26 years old, my period pain finally went away, something that I never thought was possible. It went away. And so that's an example of the healing. And so going back to our, myth, having symptoms in the womb is a sign of something wrong. Yeah, symptoms are not easy. Symptoms are uncomfortable. Symptoms are, of course, we want to get rid of them, right? Nothing angers me more than when some of like these healers, practitioners are like, well, why do you want to get rid of your period pain? I know that there's a reason for it. They want to get underneath the psychology of, our relationship to our symptoms, but it would anger me. It's because I don't want to be in pain, right? So of course. However, our symptoms are so much bigger than just problems in our lives, right? They're not problems. They're here to um, bring messages that are in our body from our wombs up to the surface, right? Our wombs can be, and I know you have so much to say about this, Naomi. Our wombs are draw
I'm
our wombs are like little drawers that we just stuff our stuff, right? And at one point she starts to scream, right? Our bodies communicate through symptoms when something is not quite in alignment. And for me, that was exactly what was shown. My mother wound, which is the first person that I had connection with, is my mother, right? There was something out of alignment there, and that relationship was rippling into all these layers of my existence and of my being. And this pain came not to punish me or to give me a problem, but to show me something that was out of alignment for me to make the shift. Because if the symptom wasn't there, my relationship to my mother would still be the same way. So so it's easy in retrospect, after, right, navigating and clearing a symptom to say, wow, what a gift. But they are a gift. And so if you're someone who is still navigating symptoms and you're in that space of, oh, but it's such a problem. I hate it. I just want to get rid of it. I see you. I see you because I understand that. And I have also moved out, and I know a lot of women have moved out of symptoms and can say, this was an initiation. Thank you.
Yes, yes. I love that point that you brought because I so much agree. Like beautiful really beautiful sharing. I think it's so true that it's very easy in retrospective to say like, oh, this is a gift. I have had that too, and I always do that because even in the moment, I'm already recognizing the gift. And I'm like, okay, yes, like I feel like I need an uplifter, right? I need some kind of inspiration, something that helps me to get through it. That's how I sometimes get through it, right? Like that immediate, like, okay, this is a gift. It's gonna be good for me. But it comes because literally our bodies are so wise, they have so much intelligence that they are really like biologically, I guess, putting like the emotional cause, right, into a physical representation that's going to lead us to our healing. And right, all of this is beautiful, but I agree, like whoever is going through this right now, I see you, it sucks. It just, that's like, it's that simple. Who wants to be in pain? Who wants to have to go through all these different symptoms in today's world with so much information, so much disinformation, so much confusion, so much navigating all these different voices, and then most of the time, I would say, woman being told that you are the problem. You're obviously the problem. You obviously have done something wrong. You're not, it's another way to say like you're not good enough because you didn't solve this yet, you know? Like it just, it's, that's the sad part, I would say. Because instead of realizing that, you know, our listening to our bodies and it's expressing its pain, its pleasure, its truth, it's so present with us and we can be present with it, but we're not often taught these things of like listening and understanding that these symptoms are just the psyche's way of speaking with us, right?
Yeah.
It's that communication and connection that it longs to have because we're a whole. We're not just the mind, we're not just the body, we're not just the heart, the soul. It's like this whole system that's alive. And I just want to bring this up. It's constantly changing. And remembering that also gets me through it because again, I'm my own cheerleader most of the time. And I'm like, we're gonna get through this, everything changes, let's go. You know, like taking that into our advantage because that's just like the truth of nature. And then at least to me, that shows me like, okay, I get to believe that there is a possible change. But you know, like you shared in your case, 7 years, right, of work. Did you say seven? Because I know for
Mhm.
me, there's a story with 7 years, so I maybe that's mine. But yeah, sometimes the journey is long and even longer. It's ever changing, right? And yeah, going back to the something wrong, I wanted to share mostly on that shame sometimes that we bring to our symptoms as well, like how it's so we're quick to silence, right, what it's trying to say, especially when it comes to like STIs, right? I remember when I was like 21, I got chlamydia. I was nowhere near at that age and time. I was very much in the world of like listening to my body and things that had already been awakening, but with an STI there was just this level of shame that was astronomical, where I was like, oh my God, like this, I was just embarrassed, plain out embarrassed, like floored with embarrassment. Um, I had never had an STI before that, and it was so weird, you know, like I don't even remember all the symptoms, but I know there was like itching. That was my main one, and just so uncomfortable. And so I can totally understand why we do silence it, why there is so much shame instead of like listening to it, you know, because it's like, of course I want to get rid of this. Like there's like this
Mhm.
thing. And yeah, I can say that I then had something else come up in the recent years with HPV, and that one I dealt with it so differently. There was just this like receptivity to going through the process, to actually like with the chlamydia, I took the pill, whatever they gave me and the gynecologist, that's it, never questioned it. And until this day, honestly, have not looked too deeply into it, and I probably should. Well, shouldn't, right? That's one of our topics. Maybe it's okay, it's in the past. Question for myself to look at later. But with the HPV, I completely dove in and I went through so many different gynecologists, even one who told me, you know, when you have HPV and like something in the cervix like I did, you sometimes need like a biopsy, right? And in this biopsy, in case hopefully you'll never have to have one for whoever's listening, but in case you haven't had one, you don't know what it is, you are literally being pinched with like a tweezer-like tool, and a little piece of your cervix is being pinched away. Now, we all know that the cervix has nerve endings, and not just has nerve endings, it like has, it's like the center of the nerve. It's like connected to like our brains even, right? Like it's directly like zoom, this cord of like from the bottom to the top, back and forth, all these nerve endings, the vagus nerve system, it's like it's there, it's present. And this guy, no, he's like, you're not gonna feel a thing. It has no feeling. It has no sensation. I was like, you're kidding me, right? And I'm like, no, 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 no. You know, it took me like I have 15 minutes. I'm crying. I'm crying. Okay, the most painful thing in my life, I'm just gonna leave it there. Like I yelled, and this guy who does not have on like does he have a vagina? No. Does he have a womb? No. Does he have a cervix? No. But the textbook told him that it has no sensation, right? So I'm yelling because it hurts, and he's like, Senora, you can't yell. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you want me to tear some part of your scrotum or something? Like, are you seriously telling me I can't yell? It was such, I never went back to that guy. No, all this to say, I allowed myself to really search for the gyno that was right for me. And I allowed myself to take the HPV into the world of the emotions, into the world of let's research this. So let's read some books, let's listen to the podcast, let's take the herbs. I did everything except for whatever they wanted to do to me, which I did not allow, which I'm honestly very proud of in this case, because one of the biggest things I learned with HPV, and I'm saying this for anyone who might be going through it, is your cervix has a cold. That's it. It's a virus, right? It has a cold, and that cold can go away. And in most cases, right? I don't want to, this is my case. I am cleared nowadays. It took me 2 years to clear it. I know a lot of women who have years with this. I can share, and I could record a separate podcast myself of all the things I did. And I know that it's not going to work for everyone. I know that every woman has her length. Some even have less time than me, right? 2 years might be like a lot for some. But I know the one thing that helped me is just having that in mind, that this is like a cold, right? And it's okay. And it can go away. And I can take my time with it and listen to it and be with it. And like that presence in and of itself is so healing sometimes, to just be with it and like not admit like, oh my God, I have a huge problem. Like there's just this yeah, this immense fear and shame.
Harsh.
Something's wrong, and it's harsh. And like, of course, I know that, whoever knows about HPV, there's so many strands, and you can have the sin 1 and sin 2 and sin 3, and like every single one is different. So not everyone's going to be able to play it like me and give herself those 2 years of time and see how it changes, right? And the gynecologist is for sure not going to lead you to any natural solutions or any real support unless you find a real good one, which I did eventually. And one more thing that ties to that in symptoms, this is very personal. She taught me that we do not need to pathologize everything. And that's because when I finally went for that checkup, that I needed to at the 2-year mark to see if HPV was still in my system, and it came out clear, and I was like over the moon. Um, this gyno is a holistic gyno. I was like, every woman needs one of these. I do not understand how the system of the gynecology has so many men. I gotta say it. I just don't get it, because they just don't, they can't relate. I know they learn from their textbooks. I know some of them do it out of the goodness of their heart, and I know that there's amazing gyno men out there, but more often than not, like it's just not the case. And this woman, she was everything I could have asked for and more. Like the session was 2 hours. I was given all the time in the world to relax, to lay back. Like we chatted first. I didn't even get on the bed. She even taught me how to put the legs in a more comfortable position. You know what I'm saying? Like this was like the dream of gyno. Like I used to cry in every single meeting, and this changed the game for me. But why did she say that to me? Every time I bleed in my third day, I have some clots that come out for years now. Now, I don't know when I heard this, but at some point in the time of me bleeding until today, which has been for the last approximately 17, 18 years, right? I'm 30 now. I started bleeding when I was 13, if I did the math wrong. So sorry. Um, at some point, I heard that if you have clots and they're bigger than a size of the quarter, you have a problem. I don't know what that problem would be because I don't remember. I could care less. But all I know is that around for like 8 years now, on my third day, I have a little bit bigger clots than a quarter size, and it's always the same. It's consistent. And after that, my bleed just phases out slowly, slowly. And it's like, this is what my body does. And I asked her already with shame. I was already ashamed. I was already sure that this is a huge problem. And I asked her, like, almost like, okay, like, this is really bad, right? Like, I was already like really sure that this is bad, you know? And she's like, could we maybe not pathologize everything? Like, would it be okay if this was okay for your body? Like, what if this is normal for you, right? What if we understood also that, the uterus walls, they're not cookie cutter, smooth and perfect and just a straight line. They have these crevices. They have this shape. And sometimes blood drops and it like slides through, right? Because the blood is sliding through the walls. And it might like, come together and slide and stay a little bit in one of these like caves. And then it joins and it creates a bit bigger clot. And for every woman, it's just going to be different, right? There's going to be the woman that don't clot, and there's going to be the woman that clot every single day, and there's going to be me that I have on my third day consistently this big clot that comes out. And it's not huge, right? I'm not talking about something huge. I think I can trust my body's wisdom to tell me if this is something I should be scared of. And the thing is, my body was never scared of this. Back in the days when I was painting with my blood, I was so happy to see this clot because I could, me wearing period panties, I was like, yay, I don't have the cup to paint from. I was like, oh, clot, let me dissolve it with a little water and now I can paint, right? Like my body was always like happy. I was like, oh, I can feel it drop. Like I was happy to be so attuned with my bleed. It never occurred to me that this is wrong until I read it's wrong. Someone telling me, probably some doctor who maybe doesn't even bleed, telling me that this is a problem, right? So this is something also interesting to share when we're talking about, right, the whole like, oh, there's a symptom, there's a sign of something wrong. Well, what if not everything is a huge symptom? What if we don't need to pathologize everything? That's another question, right? I mean, I think every woman needs to discern, needs to have her trusted gyno or her trusted holistic something or her whatever she trusts. And it's okay that it's all different things. And it's also okay when we don't trust, because sometimes we can't trust. It's hard, right? But for me, I think normalizing that was the best thing ever, and just really relaxing and saying like, hey, you know what? Maybe not everything has to be a symptom, because it's not always a symptom. I don't know,
And
maybe.
I think we see this within the allopathic gynecological community and also within the natural holistic community of there's something wrong. Let's fix it.
Yeah.
And I believe it's a little bit stronger, at least from my personal experience within the allopathic gynecological community, because the medical system as a whole does teach medical professionals to carry this this belief in scientific data and peer-reviewed journals, and that all the medical knowledge around the female body that they have is truth, right? It's fact, and it's less open to alternative perspectives, whereas it's the opposite, right? For people who are more holistically minded, there is more openness to science in that way. And what I found is this the way that gynecologists can often present their diagnoses or their information is in a very charged way, right?
So
Whether it's an STD or HPV, right, from your experience, from mine, right? It's
girl,
often this
I have
language.
I was like,
Yes,
plain out, told you have
yes,
cancer, and if you don't now freeze your cervix and cut it off, you're gonna die. And I
yes,
was like, I have seen one. This can go away. Like 88% chances that this goes away on its own. I did my research. Why don't you do yours? You
yes.
know, I was
Oftentimes
mad.
gynecologists will present information using if-then statements, right? If you don't do this, then this will happen. If you don't take this antibiotic, then you will become infertile. If you don't treat this HPV the way that I present to you, then you will live with this forever, get cancer. And so unintentionally, maybe unconsciously, intentionally, to create fear and to create this sensation of I have authority over your own body based on the
And also to
evidence.
take off the responsibility in a sense, because it's like, well, I warned you now. So now if you didn't do it, I told you you could die. I told you you could be infertile. So now if you don't do it, I said it. I made sure you have fear, right? I'm trying to get that reaction from you. And it's almost like, okay, let me just wash my hands real quick and just throw a little like if then to you. And now it's all on you. And they don't what happened to like, right? The medicine being this, journey that like this support you. Like I wasn't told that there are certain foods that I could maybe support my HPB with, herbs. Like I wasn't told about the exercise. All of this I knew, but like there's so many things we're not told that just come together. Because I think both of us in the end of the day were saying there's nothing wrong also with needing the conventional. There's nothing wrong also with having space for that in life. And I want to say it especially because I know a dear friend of mine who had HPV way differently from me. And I'm very glad she went with the conventional route and she is healthy today. And I would never want to shame any woman who chooses any of that route for herself, as long as it's her choice. And even if it came with fear, right? But I think it's like that conversation of there needs to be inclusion of the whole.
And
We are,
I
right?
think also it's an understanding of the positioning of authority. I think that the allopathic gynecological community needs to understand how it is that they present information and how they present it, how they present who's the authority here. And I think that's the fundamental difference between the Western medical model and the holistic alternative. Western holistic, and by the way, I don't think either of us here are trying to say don't go to a gynecologist or shaming because I have had wonderful gynecologists. I have met wonderful people who are well-intentioned, but I'm speaking to the institution as a whole that
Exactly.
tends to position themselves as the sources of authority and neglects the female body, the woman itself you're speaking to, as her own source of authority. And
Yeah.
the same information, Naomi, what I'm noticing is that under the microscope, we're seeing this virus can be presented in a very different way, right? It can be presented in a way that is informing, but isn't necessarily giving her a prescription of if you don't do this, then this will happen, right? Because we want women to feel empowered. And I want to feel empowered after I leave my session with my gynecologist. I don't want to feel cornered and pressured to take action in the way that you present, or else I will be living in this inner turmoil of, but I didn't do it. And now I have to live with this forever because we need to follow our gut feelings, right? And my gut feeling most of the time will say, actually, let me take a plant first and see how I respond. But I will always hear my gynecologist say, yes, but until you take this medication, you're going to have it. And so a lot of my symptom relief work has had to deal with me navigating that inner conflict. And I think that can be resolved for a lot of women if gynecologists and medical professionals as a whole can shift the way that they see a female body with symptoms in their office, see them as a source of knowing and knowledge and authority, and speak to them in that way.
See them already as whole, right? Not
Yeah.
like, oh, you have a problem and now, like, I agree with you because also during the HPV healing journey that I had, I was by another gynecologist that I also, and I agree, right? There's amazing gynecologists. We already said that. I'm not going to repeat it, but I think the listeners get it. But this one in like in between the gyno who told me that I have no pain in the cervix and I'm crazy for yelling, and the beautiful woman, not I'm not saying beautiful woman because she's a woman, but just because wow, like I was finally given like a justice to the gyno experience by finding her. It just made me trust gynecology again in a way, right? But and yeah, in between the cervix story and then this woman helping me see that not everything has to be a pathology. We have enough, right? We don't always have to be doing, healing. We can also chill the fuck out. There was this guy who was like, this gyno, and he told me the only way you're gonna get through this is if you put these suppositories in your vagina, right? Like this is gonna go into the like straight to the cervix, kill off the virus, and I don't know what chemical was in there, but I was so afraid of not doing it, and I was so afraid of doing it. Naomi, I bought
Again,
them.
if you
I
don't do
had them
this,
with,
this is the
yeah,
only way.
the only way.
Again,
I had them with me. My mom was like, well, just draw the Y because she has all this radius Dasi symbols to like neutralize. My mom was like a Reiki mama, an energetic mama. She also in the past has told me like, oh, I think you just want to be a victim. That was the years that we've done a lot of work to get to the point where I'm validating, and she also trusts me in making my decisions as well because it's a story. Mamas are a story. But point being, I agree. I had so much fear in putting them, not putting them, and I came to the conclusion. I said, you know what? I'm gonna try. I tried 2 days in a row. By the third day, the thing wouldn't go up. The suppository, which looks like, right, like a little, I don't even know how to describe it, but I hope our listeners know what it is, and if not, please Google it.
bullet. It looks like a
A
tiny
bullet,
bullet.
right? Exactly. Thank you. It looks like a tiny bullet, and it's like creamy or something, whatever. And you have to shove it in there. That was for me already like problematic. Just this feeling of like I'm putting in something that, and my vaginal walls have always been very reactive. Like they'll shut down in a second if they feel any kind of threat. And that's what happened. By the third day, they were like, that's it. Nothing enters. And I just couldn't. I swear I tried every relaxation technique and my body was clearly saying no, and so I dropped it for months. And then I even tried one more time. And again, it happened the same thing. And I even like I questioned myself, like, is my mind controlling this? Because I'm already coming maybe like closed off, and I was like, no, this can heal. Like I played with it, and I ended up realizing that it was okay if I want to take my own route. It's okay if I just want to trust my own body and the herbs and right the yoni steams and all the teas and the eating well, the relaxing. That was the biggest medicine, right? Like just relax, just go on your nature walks, just like lower cortisol. We have like all these things. And I think 3-4 months of that, poof, it was gone.
Something that's coming up for me is our most recent Medicine Mermaid call. We had a sister who came on, and Naomi and I were sharing our personal experiences, which are very similar in some ways with the medical system. She was sharing that her story is actually the opposite, that she was raised very natural. Her family said, would, say, give a tea before giving a pill. And so when she started navigating symptoms in her own body and she gave herself permission to turn to the Western medical system, that's what she had this opening and this release and this relief to be able to choose her
Mm-hmm.
own sovereignty, to allow her body to choose what it needs and to get help. And so, what we're sharing here is just spaciousness to listen to the yeses and the nos and the maybes and the question marks that you hear within your own body and to feel at peace with the choices that you make, right? If you end up choosing to take the medicine because you're sick and tired of dealing with the symptom, or if you actually hear the doctor say, I think you should take the medicine, but a voice inside says, actually, I want to try my mugwort tea first, and turning to that, you have full permission. And I think the last point I'll make within this first myth, because we still have a few more to get through, is that the we tend to feel like this pressure to kill the bug, right? To get rid of the bug, to get rid of the symptom, right? And I think we can transform our understanding of our pelvis, of our wombs, of our bodies as a whole, away from this antagonistic war analogy of attack the invader, right? To wipe the bug, to see it as
Oh,
a ecosystem, as a
yeah.
garden. Our wombs are gardens, and sometimes we're gonna have weeds. Even the word weed, I say with quotation marks because what do we define as a weed, right? What actually is a weed? But sometimes we have bacteria or fungi in there that aren't necessarily ideal, but they're part of the ecosystem. And I think that isn't necessarily to say let's live with STDs and let's live with, imbalances in our biomes, but it's to say this is part of the natural process of being in a body, right?
Yeah.
Having balances and imbalances and being in coherence, and navigating the waves, right? This idea of being perfect and healed, which is myth number two. So we're kind of segueing into that.
Right.
It's a myth in of itself. It's a lie, right? It's normal to go through periods of symptoms and then resolve and to shift our perspective around our bodies as gardens, right?
100%. I
Yeah.
agree. And exactly, just exactly word by word, you know? There was something I want to say and it slipped, so I'm just gonna like close off also with this one so we can go to the next. But I
Yeah.
think that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And yes, and if it comes back, I'll share, but whatever. I was just gonna go into, I guess literally, what you said about this. Um, no, it just went away. Well, Naomi, I think that's maybe the sign of like we gotta
We gotta
close it.
move forward. Move
Oh wait,
forward.
okay. It came back. You talked about how like right the invader, we gotta like get this out immediately. It's a problem, right? Again, touching on that. And yeah, that was exactly what this gyno was, right, sharing with me with putting these suppositories. And so it's like you said, right? Like just having that choice because my choice in that moment was, well, I will miss out on having the relationship here with my womb. Because instead of that, I started waking up every morning, putting my hands on my breast first, doing a massage, and then go sliding down to my womb space and having a conversation with my cervix every morning. That's what I was doing instead. And I got to just benefit from that, like just get to know a part of me that I felt was, the cervix is anyway so dark, we don't even get to see it, like it was just so beautiful. And at the same time, I also have my story of when I did choose conventional, like medicine, and just that can be maybe a story we share another day. I won't get into it, but I just agree with that so much because sometimes it's not one or the other, right? It's not like one way. We said this in the beginning. There isn't a right or wrong. It's just experiences, and it's just being open to going into it because of what we said, or at least what I said in the beginning when I started speaking on this is our bodies will never bring us something that's actually to attack us and to harm us. It has done everything for our survival, and it's just wanting us to heal, that it's just going to bring these things up to support us and have us pay attention to what's going on underneath all these layers and underneath the surface. And then we really find gifts in there. We find power, like we find our voice sometimes. I did want to share something about when my father passed away when I was 18, because I did find my voice because of that, and it was the one time in my life I had this crazy severe pain like you described, with this like being in the shower, like in this trance of pain. And it was a time where I didn't even know yet about how the voice works with the nervous system and how calming and soothing it is. Like I had no idea, but that's like when my feminine intuition kicked in and woke up. And the only thing that helped me, just like warm water helped you, was doing like expression of my subtle sounds. And just like nothing other than that came out. It was just like me in the bed, just like, ooh, like all these like moaning and sounds and whatever needed to be expressed because there was so much grief. there was so much going on. And if I had skipped out on that, my mom also was like, here, take the pill. You're choosing to be a victim if you're not taking the pill. You're choosing to suffer. And I was like, no, like this is so rich right now. This is like, I didn't even know, that like, oh, I can sing in my womb and like bring the voice from the womb, whatever, the vocal cords connection and the vaginal like muscles. I didn't know any of that, but like intuitively, it was just like, I am so sad right now. I'm in this void of feeling the emptiness of a loss. I'm in deep grief. Of course, I was gonna have continuous cycles where my womb's just like roaring with all this grief that I never expressed. And I feel like, again, there's no right or wrong, but I think I'm just incredibly grateful in the end of the day to not have skipped out on getting to know my symptoms, on getting to know these quote unquote problems, because it leads me to me. It leads me to get to know myself deeper. It leads me to experience life deeper. And we know that's not always available for everyone. But I think that maybe the empowering thing is like, if you can choose, that's what I would say. Make sure you're choosing whatever. It's not just happening to you, but you're choosing. That's the empowerment here, right? Whether you choose A or B, whatever it is, choose from a place of connection. Because even when you go and you take the pill, you can choose that with connection of like, now I want to surrender and just release and not have to deal with it. And that can also be empowering and beautiful. So
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
wanted.
Yeah. And I hope also this downgrading the charge that can sometimes happen with the, oh shit, my symptoms, that the shift of perspective of let's see our womb as a garden, as an ecosystem of all different kinds of bacteria and fungi, and it's all part of my natural ecology as a female body, that can downgrade the charge of when a symptom appears. Right? A symptom appears and there's all this pressure around us to fix it, get rid of it, to repair the thing, to get rid of the invader, right? We've, as we've mentioned,
The pain.
to use this new lens of, oh, but this is part of the garden of who I am, right? To bring down that fear. So then whatever choice you make is coming from a place of embodied sovereignty, or at least as much as possible, right? So I think we can head into some into common myth number two.
Symptom number two.
Symptom number two, common myth number two, which is having the perfect cycle. And
Okay.
this
Yeah.
is something that I think is very common, especially if you are a woman who is online, on social media, on her health and wellness journey. I see all different kinds of beautiful, incredible womb healers who talk about the cycle, who talk about the bleed, who talk about the phases of the bleed. Sometimes I notice, though, is this language of it should be, it shouldn't be. If there's this, there's an imbalance here. If there's not this, there's an imbalance here. And it can create this avatar of a perfect woman who bleeds on her cycle, woman who has
Action programming.
the perfection programming, which is just another version of Superwoman, right? Of the good girl,
Yeah.
of the woman who's got it all figured out, right? A woman who now has a perfect 28-day cycle, who knows exactly when she's ovulating and has that perfect egg white mucus on ovulation and has crazy sexy libido, has no symptoms, and that's not often realistic for most women. And for myself specifically, when I was 22, or in 2022, I entered into this more pro-metabolic nutrition, fertility awareness world, right? I
Mhm.
joined this women's um, menstrual boot camp. I won't say her name, but I joined her online group um, to help deal with my period pain. And she would educate us every single week on our cycles, on the different phases of our cycles, and what's normal hormonally, and all these different things, and what are signs of fertility and how to measure your basal body temperature. All of these things that I now implement into, I guess, my own sessions with women who are exploring natural contraception. But the way that it was taught was very similar to how Western medicine often communicates. If not, if this, then this. If it's not like this, then that means this. And a lot of um, overgeneralization and maybe not enough understanding of the nuance of a female's body and understanding what's the range of okayness for a female body and for specific women. So, being surrounded by this holistic alternative community teaching me these things about fertility, I started to notice within my own body, oh shit, like my temperature's doing this. And I'm noticing this and not noticing this with my cervical mucus. Oh shit, that must mean I'm not fertile. And what she would say is if you're not noticing this, then you probably have this, or you need to do this, or your gut's all messed up. And whenever anyone says gut problems, because it's such a vast world, I am
Love that
immediately
prompt.
dysregulated. Immediately dysregulated because what does that mean? Gut healing, it could be so many things. So I went for many years believing that I was not fertile. I ended up giving up completely on natural contraception, on studying my own fertile signs because I said, well, there's something wrong with me. And that kind of fits back in with common myth number one, believing that there's a problem.
Yeah, they
So
all feed into each other,
they all
honestly.
feed into each other. And so I went many years thinking that I wasn't fertile until last year when I was in Brazil, here where I now live, and I was navigating symptoms within my womb. And I turned to Naomi, who one of her
Yeah.
modalities is integrative pelvic care. And I said, hey, can you support me because I'm feeling this overwhelm? And part of the story that was revealed in our session together was the story that I'm not fertile. And she did an Akashic Records reading with this pelvic integrative work. And the message was very clear, like, you are fertile. Sometimes your symptoms present as if you're infertile, but you are. And it was this session with Naomi plus an ayahuasca ceremony that I did last year where the medicine said very clearly, stop with this story. You are fertile. And a couple of other things after that that I completely shifted the narrative within myself and said, okay, I am fertile. I
Oh,
am
that's but
fertile.
you're like, remember that. And of course you would, because it's your experience, but I'm just touched that I could support you because
Yes,
girl,
of course.
story.
We support each other. And so
Yeah.
then in January, I went to do a ultrasound of my womb for another reason. And they found two teeny weeny little fibroids. They're like less than a centimeter big at the top and at the front of my womb. And I have been connecting with this paradigm of understanding the psychobiological roots of our symptoms. And with fibroids or anything related to the uterus, it's either a conflict related to my femaleness or a conflict related to my fertility. And I realized I understood that I am fertile after years of being in this inner turmoil of I'm never going to have a kid, or I need to do all of this work, or I need to heal my gut, and then I can be fertile and have a baby. Once I realized internally that that was a lie, that I am, that was a limiting belief created by people who couldn't communicate to me my uniqueness in my cycle, I entered a resolve of that story. And that triggered this resolve healing phase within my uterus. And the fibroid, the symptom, is a result of that. And so now I'm working on digesting that story, making sure it's truly cleared from me, this story that I can't have children, that I'm infertile, but knowing that the symptom is also a sign of the resolve. And that was such a beautiful reminder of yes, 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 right? There is shifts that happen, and sometimes what looks like a problem is actually just a show, just a sign that you're doing it. You're already doing it. So you can just let go of it and just let it be. Sometimes there's the medicine of looking towards the thing. Sometimes there's the medicine of looking away. And the looking away is just as important as the looking towards,
100%.
right? And my
I
team
agree.
taught me
Yeah.
that.
So you continue. You have more to say?
I think for now that's it. I'm curious what you have to say about the perfect cycle.
Yeah, no, I just want to agree because it's literally how you said, like there's this looking at some point we gotta just look away because we can't, otherwise we continue in that circle or feeding continuously. It's like affirmations. I really don't like them anymore. Gotta say it, okay? Maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but it's like if I'm constantly needing to affirm, like why would I constantly be needing to affirm my reality if it's a reality? Like I it doesn't click with me anymore. So it's kind of like that. It's like at some point, like you said, we got to close that story and just release it with love and know that we were there. And yeah.
And working with the subconscious, we know that
Oh,
it's
that was the point.
the unconscious, subconscious is largely responsible for the things that manifest in our life, not our conscious. And so if we're just affirming to our conscious mind, I'm fertile, I'm fertile, I'm fertile, right? It's not the conscious mind that doesn't believe the story. It's all of the underneath, the underbelly of the glacier
Yeah, the
that
thing, exactly. That's the
exactly.
thing. Like if we continuously need to affirm it, then we're not believing it as well. And there's something there. Like I think the medicine for me was one day realizing, like, you know what? Even if this weren't true, I still love myself.
Mhm.
That was really healing for me. Like, even if I'm not fully healed, because it's always like, I am fully healed and I'm blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what? Even if I'm not fully healed, I still love myself. Like, that really changed the game for me. Because I don't know, there was just sudden realization of like, I don't need to, I don't know, we're getting into another topic. So I'm just going to
Right, the
jump back.
fully
But
healed conversation. But I feel
yes,
like it fits so much into the perfect
yes,
cycle, the perfect woman, the perfect womb. And it's so important because even within the realm that the space that we are as holistic and alternative and womb healing, we do find this thing of in the follicular phase, you're like this. And when you're in ovulation, you have all of this energy. It's your summer. And when you're menstruating, this is when you're in your winter and you're tired and you should be sleeping. And while I understand that, I think that this system of the seasons is so beautiful because it offers us space to actually embrace our cyclical nature, right? If we lived in a hyper masculine world, we'll call it, where all you ever do is work, 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 always the same, there's this expectation of constancy, of linearity, this testosterone brain, right? Of course, now bringing in cycles, it brings in space to be flexible, to be variable. But I think unintentionally, what it sometimes does with some women is say, well, when you're here, you're like this. And when you're here, you're supposed to be like this. It creates more rules. Um, and I think that we can take this beautiful model of the seasons and soften it, right? Actually bring more of that spaciousness to say, okay, well, this is an idea or a guideline, but now let's apply it to your body now, your body today. Because Naomi and I, when we talk, in our personal life, just exchanging WhatsApp on our day to day and talking about our cycles present actually slightly differently. And looking at my own cycle from month to month, there is variation, right? This month, I noticed around ovulation, like I was actually quite tired, right?
yeah.
But it's not always like that. Sometimes I notice on the luteal, I'm a little bit more irritable, but it's not always like that. And from me to you, right, there's a lot of difference. And does that mean I'm not living my fall correctly? Does that mean your winter is better than mine, right?
Right. It's
So
different.
yeah, I think we can apply these beautiful things that we see, but give ourselves permission to create some distance, though. Create some
Yeah.
distance, be in our bubble of discernment. What actually serves me from this model and what doesn't? What can I take? What can I leave? Right?
I believe it's also going way deeper than the surface, the ideal in quotation marks, right? The perfect in quotation marks, not so much focusing, let's say, on a number, right? I gotta bleed every 28 days, but more on a rhythm. And that's a rhythm that is personal. That's a rhythm that is constantly changing, like I said before. That's a rhythm that no one can really tell you how it should be, right? Because there's not only one true number that's correct, right? We know now that it's not about 28-day cycles, it can be 24, it can be 40. There's all these different numbers in between, right? And even that 24-40, I know that that's what I heard, that the range is like healthy, but I even have met women who are in 21-day cycles. I've met women who are in 45-day cycles. I can't speak to whether this is healthy or not, and I don't think that's the point right now, and what I brought for today at least. In my perspective of the having the perfect cycle, right, in that quotation marks, what I know is that perfection programming that we have, it's so deeply rooted. There's all these social myths, right, that create all this confusion and the guilt and the pressure. And all I can speak to is like I myself had so much of this pressure, like you mentioned already before, fam, like I know that women can only really know, I guess, their ovulation by listening. I think that's the whole point
Mhm.
of, how can we be attuned to our own rhythm? That's the magic sauce here. How can we listen very deeply to our bodies because they're constantly changing? Like you mentioned with the summer and the fall and the winter and the spring and whatever. I love that. I truly do love it, but I love it as long as I can explore within it, as long as I get the chance to meet my fall anew. It's like it's like fall of 2021 was not the same as fall of 2022. So why would fall of my last cycle be the same as this one, right? Like there's always this slight changes, and that goes for any season. So, it can take a whole lifetime, in my opinion, to get to know our cyclical rhythms and our wombs and our whole cycle, because it's a lifetime of being with it. We're not meant to, like, it's not something we can just study once, one and done, copy paste. I'm always gonna have this, like, I might have been called lucky, sure, because I have quite consistent cycle in comparison. If we were to compare, I know better than to compare, but I can say I have mostly always, with a few exceptions, but I have them, but I have mostly always bled between day 28 and 31. That's what I expect. That's what usually happens. And it keeps me pretty consistent within the same moon cycle, too. I gotta admit, most of the time, the full moon is somewhere there in my bleed days, whether it's on the first day, whether it's on the second, sometimes it's on the last, but the full moon is there. And it's been that way for years. And I know a lot of women are going to be like, you're so lucky. And maybe it's luck, maybe it's just my body's rhythm, but that's the point, right? We need to each one of us be that curious that she gets to know her rhythm. And that's okay, because no woman has the same rhythm. And I myself have changed in my rhythm every now and then. I think once a year, I have this weird, like something happens and it's usually emotional for me. And suddenly I don't bleed until day 40. And I even had a 21-day cycle this year, and I was like, that's new. And I freaked out. Of course I freaked out, because I'm told that 21 days is a problem. But then I was like, well, my body's trying to communicate something, and let's see before I freak out if the next cycle is going to be the same. Because what if there was space for each one of them to be different? What if I created space to listen before I freak out to what's happening? Right, and like you said, that affects how we approach this whole, like, oh, in ovulation I have to be now super perky and up with it and going out and being okay with meeting. And what if I suddenly don't want to meet anyone and I feel super luteal in my ovulation? And what if in luteal phase I want to work the fuck out because I feel like it, because I have all this pent up energy, because maybe in my follicular I was still moody for some reason? And like, what if, and what if the opposite? What if I actually hiked on my first day of my bleed? Because I literally did that one time in Crete. I started bleeding and I went on a hike with myself because I felt like it. I climbed this mountain, girl. I walked for more than an hour on that first day. And it just happened. I didn't force myself. It wasn't planned. I was with no one. It was just me and the hike and the goats, right? No one forced me. It wasn't one of those situations where you're like, well, I planned this trip, so now I got to put up with it. No, I just went on a hike. And so
Mhm.
I think it's just that openness to the constant change, and that's okay, right? It's like everything else anyways changes, so, and everything else is okay. Like we always go to this, like, oh, the trees and the right, nature is just like every day a new thing, and why are we any different, right? But
Yeah,
yeah.
I think something I wanted to comment on what you said was the, oh, you're so lucky because you bleed relatively regularly and close to the full moon. I think the only reason why we would even use that word lucky, even ironically, is because we do still live in a world that is very patriarchal, that is capitalistic, and needs to have hyperstructure. It wants to know exactly the day you're going to bleed, and it wants exactly to be on day 30 because that creates some degree of constancy,
Yeah.
right? So even within this world of natural fertility awareness method, we do still see this hyper masculine model being bleeding through, right? Because if we didn't live in the world that we lived in, right, before we had these calendars, did we really need to know did we have to rely on the number of days of our cycle to know where we are in our cycle, to know whether or not we're pregnant or not? Probably not. Why? Because there are other more feminine ways of relating to our fertility, right? Sensation, right?
They
Energetics. I know women who don't measure their basal body temperature or use even mucus. They rely solely on their sensation and energy levels alone. They don't count, they just know. And I think that's a more, it's not right or wrong. It's not a right or wrong. It's just a more feminine approach to understanding our cycle. And so I think that this is a really important conversation, right? What are the expectations that we're placing on our cycle,
all
even
over.
for, right? What are the expectations and the styles of information that we are prioritizing in our relationship to our body, right? So, yeah, I think we can move into
Oh,
the
I
next.
was gonna share something on expectations actually to
Go
close
ahead,
this
go
off.
ahead. Go ahead, and
Uh,
then we'll move on.
yeah, because the expectations part is huge, and um that is something that, and I wanna touch on like that, because I mentioned in the beginning, right? There's like the confusion, the guilt, the pressure, and that expectation of how our cycles should be, that perfect cycle, is immensely putting this pressure that usually also then leads to like the symptoms. I feel like it's like the chicken and the egg, right? Like that loop. But beyond that, what I wanted to say, so a little storytelling. I was like 20 years old, okay, when I was like basically bleeding all the time with the full moon, right? We established that. I have been quite constant. I did flip for 5 years to the new moon, and that was very interesting. And then I did flip again, like every like I and it's all gonna tie together, okay? Because we did want to go into the new moon, full moon thing, and so this is actually the tie into our
Yeah.
next myth, my
Yeah,
story.
maybe
So
we actually introduce it. So the third common myth is bleeding on the full moon, bleeding on the new moon.
exactly. So and so I'm gonna tie this perfect cycle into that next myth because I'm the perfect example. I gotta say it, okay? From the moment I can remember my bleeds and me tying it to the moon, it's when I was 20, okay? And this is back in 2015, right? The Insta world hasn't blown up yet with all these mamas who are talking about fertility and the FAM method. And of course, there was talk about it. There must have been a lot more than I was aware back then, but I know that it wasn't as much as today, all these womb mamas, everything. And the main message back then was if you're not bleeding with the new or full moon, something's wrong, right? Like that's not the perfect cycle. Now, I hadn't read that yet. So my story begins before even seeing that. That was something I saw after I noticed I'm bleeding with the full moon because I literally started connecting with the moon. I was mesmerized by it, and I would look at it throughout its face every night. I would find it until this day. I can just go out and I like suddenly I see the moon. It's always there. Like I always find the moon, whether it's in the day, in the night, whatever. Me and the moon, I love my connection to it. But back then it was just suddenly, suddenly one day I realized that every time I was bleeding, it was in a full moon. But then it became this expectation of I have to bleed on the full moon. right? Especially when I read this post of a woman, I won't say her name, but she was always talking about it, that if you bleed on a full moon, you're a red moon witch or
Mhm.
something. Is your
Yeah, there's a word
archetype,
for it.
right? Some kind of thing. And then if you bleed on the new moon, then you're like in the mother maiden, ready to have children, something kind of energy, right? Like I don't even remember anymore because honestly, I just hit delete. That's what I do. Irrelevant information back then that like would pressure me, at some point deleted. Back then, though, I so much believed it that not only did I have this crazy expectation of myself to the point where if I was off by 2 to 3 days, meaning like if I bled a day or two before the full moon or a day or two after, I would freak out. There was a problem. Suddenly, I wouldn't be as powerful. Suddenly, I wouldn't be as aligned. Like, and any woman I met who wasn't in this full moon or new moon, I was like, well, they must be doing something wrong. And I wasn't openly saying that or wanting to judge anyone. It was just like I bought into this so easily. Because it was so, that was the message, and I ate it up for a moment. It didn't last with me years, but it was like, whoa, what? It's huge pressure, right? So, and the thing is, like I said, I did suddenly, out of nowhere, I missed my period for 2 weeks. Suddenly, I started being with a new moon, and then it was like that for 5 years. I was always on the new moon. And then it jumped back, right, to the full moon. So it's also accompanied with the fact that I've almost always had either a new moon or full moon bleed. I have almost never, except for like the random once a year time where my bleed does a little something different than what my bleed's used to doing, right? I've always been on that. So it was so easy for me to also believe it. Now, what I want to get to with this is I think the work, it was immense pressure for me, okay? Like, and I don't feel shame saying it. I kind of just want to laugh. But I can't, I can't like I have this thing that I believe in. It's like any information we have today, we can never use against our past self. Right? So I gotta let that version of me be, that version of me that like felt so scared of losing that constant. And I know where that came from in my life, right? I have a life that has never been constant, has always been full of change. I think for me, having the only thing constant in my life was like me having a bleed in every full moon or me having a bleed in every new moon. Like that was very safe for me, and I understand why it was such a big deal for me to like not have it beyond the if I'm right or wrong or if it's good or not. But beside that, what what helped me, and it was almost like it's since I was 20 until I was 27, okay, that every time it was maybe a little less pressure, but I can tell there was a pressure there to always have a cycle that's like 29 days long, because for most of the time, that's what happened. And it was this fear that anything else than that is a problem. And basically, I was denying my own wholeness. Like today, whoever knows my business, right? Wholeness embodied. And the moon doesn't have just a new moon phase and a full moon phase, right? It goes through all the phases. And I do not subscribe or believe anymore that if a woman doesn't bleed on a certain new moon or full moon phase, then something's wrong. Not at all. Not only because suddenly my bleed did become a little more flexible at some point, even if it's still pretty synced up to a full moon. I nowadays sometimes bleed 2 days before, sometimes 5 days after the full moon, and I love it. I love it. But the work that I did there was the more I could bring back parts of me that I rejected, that were repressed, that were shamed, right? The more I like brought in all these versions of me, parts of me into that like place of wholeness, like all of that is welcomed, the more I appreciated the moon, not just when it was full, not when it was like that thin little new moon, like the more that I understood like all the parts are beautiful, the more it was beautiful to just bleed whenever. And the best thing, in my opinion, to close this off of the perfect, like the part of the perfect cycle at least, is we need to just be grateful. Vitamin G, there can never be enough of it. Just gratitude that we're bleeding. I know so many women who just cry whenever they finally get their bleed. I haven't had that experience as a repetitive thing. Like I said, every now and then I might have had this, like, my bleed once skipped a month and it was like a big deal, right? I have I even want to say I have the luck of having a pretty consistent bleed. I know it's not luck, but it feels sometimes that way, because I know that there are so many stories. But I think just gratitude for whatever bleed we have in whatever way it comes, because it is our womanhood, and of course, when it comes to so much pain, I mean, we cover that. Gratitude is not easy to come back by always, but I do feel like it's just like, wow, like whatever version I get to meet now, like, wow, I'm getting closer to myself. Like, that's what rescue from the experience of being a bleeding woman. It's like, oh my God, like, who am I today? Waking up and like, what's up now? Like, what do I need? What's going on? How is my heart? How is my womb? What's, that communication in and outs. And so, yeah.
I think on this topic, this myth of I should be bleeding on the new moon. I think how I received this information was that the best bleed is on the new moon. The new moon is the time to bleed, and the full moon is the time to ovulate. Sometimes it can swap, and you are this like witch sage woman if you bleed on the full moon and if you ovulate on the new moon. Either way, I also received this story of you should not, you should not,
Not
right?
synced. That was it. You're not synced properly.
Yes,
You're not lined properly. That was
yes. Yes, another reason to be perfect or not perfect. And I've always, since my first bleed as well, had to navigate with irregular cycles. And when I was young, it was more like 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I couldn't quite even put a number on it because it was so many days. And over the years, it's been going down. But I never know exactly when I'm gonna bleed. Sometimes she just comes quite randomly. I can kind of guesstimate from feeling, but it's a journey, right? It's a journey, me and my womb connecting, me and my ovaries connecting. So I never felt connected to the moon because sometimes I would bleed on the new moon, sometimes I would bleed on the full moon, sometimes on the waning, sometimes on the waxing. There was never really much of a pattern or a rhythm. And I honestly just disconnected from the moon because it just became another reason to be wrong or to have a wrong body. And last year, I decided to, out of curiosity and play, to actually track my cycle with the moons rather than with the months. And so I created this calendar for myself where I charted the 13 moons within a year. If we look at the moons, I feel more connected to a year connected to the moons rather than 365 days. So I charted
calendar.
13 moons. And you know what I realized when I charted the moons is that this whole idea of 28 days of the lunar cycle is not true.
Oh, it's 29 and a half or something. It's not even like a
Right.
29 or 30. It's like 29
Right.
and a half.
If you look at the actual moons within a year, there are some lunar cycles that are 29 days. There are some lunar cycles that are 30 days. There are some lunar cycles that are 28. There is no such thing as even the moon being 28-day cycles. And so we create this projection onto us as connected to the moon, we should have the same number of days as a cycle as the moon, but even the moon cycles, and sometimes she's 29, sometimes
Opposite.
she's 30. And
Oh,
so I saw that and I was like, wow, how incredible. And it's really beautiful to see. I recommend it if you're curious and want to connect your cycle to the moon, just to see how your body shifts in with the moon. I recommend doing this. And it's been really interesting to notice, how my bleed comes close to the new moon. Sometimes she comes closer to the full moon without this pressure and without this pathologization, but without making it a pathology, just observing and what was happening in my life that month. Maybe why
Yeah.
energetically my cycle felt more connected and synced to the full moon this month versus the new moon this month,
I
right?
want to add a layer for you and anyone listening because this is something cool I started. I'm an astrology girly, as you all know, or maybe didn't know, but now know. And another cool layer is checking if you will cycle, like if you will connect your cycle to the moon, sorry, is checking then where that moon falls in relationship to your natal chart. In what house? Right? Like, let's say you bled on the full moon in Aquarius right now a few days ago, right? Where do you have Aquarius and what house? And then that moon fell in that house, and then that's the area of life. And then, because like you said, maybe it impacted you in some certain way. Like, I noticed that when I went on that hike on my first day of my bleed, that was more in my ninth house. Like it was like this adventure, let's go out, right? And sometimes I have a cycle hit on my fourth house and I'm just like, I'm staying at home, right? Like it's like, and you see other layers, and maybe it's not going to make sense, right? I'm just putting it out
Mhm.
there. This is not another like thing for you to feel out of alignment with. It's just more like, again, like I said, curiosity, being like excited to like check in, because then the more astrology the more it's all layers, and then you can connect it to your personal planets and whatever. I'm not going to go into too much astrology now, but I think it is really cool to just take it as a game like you did, right? After years of being like, well, I can't fucking cycle with the moon or whatever and track this because I don't even know when it's coming, and then being like, hey, you know what? Let me be curious. Let's see what happens. Let me just see like what's going on, because it can just that's exactly what needs to happen, in my opinion, with everyone, just like, let's see what's going on. Because the more I allowed that, the more I wasn't uptight about it needing to fall exactly on the new moon or full moon or whatever, the more I realized like, oh, this is actually having its own dance. My this is this is actually the closing point I wanted to come. It's the reclaiming of our cyclical wisdom in such a linear world, and
Mm.
realizing that our bodies are so wise. Like, I have had times where my bleed just doesn't come when it's quote unquote supposed to come, because I was getting on a plane and it just like, hey, it did me the favor of coming 2, 3 days after so that I could go on that plane ride and not have to deal with bleeding. Or the
Yeah.
opposite, it came up earlier because I was going to go on a trip. And so maybe I needed to release whatever it is. How about we trust, right? Like, how about we understand? Again, remembering everything's in constant change. We are no exception. It's okay. There's so much immense wisdom in our cycles, and we get to like discover it. And there's so much fun to go into there. But
Yeah.
yeah, we can't control.
So so let's go into common myth number 4, which is something that I have seen a lot as a womb healing practitioner, which is womb symptoms equal a cold womb.
Mm.
And I have heard this a lot from the traditional Chinese medicine perspective, right? If you go to an acupuncturist, they'll often say, make sure you're wearing warm socks when you're on your bleed, and making sure you're covering your kidneys, and make sure that you are having warm teas and hot showers. Don't put any cold on your belly. And when I was trained in our Vigo Mayan abdominal work, they also repeated the same thing. The Mayan tradition is very similar. Don't even drink cold things, is the approach. Don't bathe in cold water. Everything is warmth, or else, right? You're going to be bringing in cold into the womb, and cold into the womb brings dis-ease and illness. And for a long time, I carried that story, and I would teach my clients that as well, because my own womb often needs warmth. And I do think a vast majority of women benefit from warmth to the womb if you're navigating symptoms, bringing in warmth, bringing in circulation, bringing in heat packs. Warm socks is actually very nourishing to the womb, to our chi, to our yin, all of those things. However, I don't think, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience, if you don't agree with me, by all means, don't agree with me. However, I personally haven't spoken to other women, listening to my teachers and my mentors. There's a population of women who, when they're on their bleed, they actually internally feel this desire for cold. they feel drawn to a cold plunge or swimming in a cold waterfall, that the idea of warmth is actually repulsive, right? And you may feel hot flashes, you may feel like irritable when you're on your bleed. And so the idea of cold is actually very attractive. And within my herbal studies, right, I trained as a vitalist herbalist with Sage Apopum, who's based out in Oregon, and he teaches herbalism from the perspective of energetics, right? Temperature, moisture, and tone. And there's many constitutions that we can have just naturally, individually, right? But even within the space like a womb, there are symptoms that can manifest that are more wind, that are more air. There are symptoms that can manifest that are more heat, or pictures that can manifest that are more cold, right? And within each of those tissue pictures and constitutions, the womb needs something different, right? A hot if you have a already hot womb, which they use the term that uses heat excitation within this tradition, right? Putting something hot is only going to exacerbate the heat. And so actually cold is aligned, right? So there is a contradiction with these different systems. And it can be hard sometimes as a holistic practitioner who uses many modalities to find some sense of to find the way when the modalities that you use often contradict one another. And I think how how I understand and how I want to practice is listen to the woman that's before me. Listen to the woman that's before me and listen to the guidance that's coming, right? And the approach that has been working is to listen to the bio-individuality, right? The title of part of the title of this episode is embracing bio-individuality. And so wherever there is rule and prescription and if not this, then this, right? This is kind of the theme of this whole conversation, right? That we're bringing up. That doesn't really work. And so a lot of women actually need cold, and that's okay. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
I
I'm not one of
yeah.
those women. I'm not one of those women, but if you are that woman, it's your womb's constitution. It's perhaps even your whole body's constitution. Perhaps you are a natural pitta person and you have more heat signs than, you know, a vata person.
I want to speak just to the fear, because I guess it touches again on this like perfection piece. Because I have heard all of these. I don't have like Naomi, the whole Chinese. I can't even name it. I don't have your tool on that whole area, right? I didn't, other than taking a little course here, a little workshop there, I don't have the full story. But I've heard before, of course, this whole like cold womb symptom, and that I should be doing hot this and hot that. And the one that I heard, the biggest one was like I should not even enter the water, right? So and it was funny to me because I heard this after a few bleeds of me feeling drawn naturally to go and swim in the river on one of my days of bleeding because it felt good, or to go into the sea on one of the days that I'm bleeding because it felt fucking good. You know, and sometimes the water was colder and sometimes it was warmer, but there's a part of me that almost like I really want to swim. I'm a constant mermaid. And yet one day I was told that I'm not even allowed to take a fucking bubble bath because I shouldn't even be in water for that long. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And I'm sorry, I'm cursing if like this isn't so nice. I know I sometimes do it. I have to admit. I sometimes curse. I enjoy it at times. But I was just
I
like,
have cursed many times already. It's fine.
okay, I don't even realize. Sometimes it just comes out, whatever. The point is, I was just like, really? Is this another rule? And in that moment, though, I think it takes me a while to really feel that empowerment of like, well, I'm just gonna go back to listening to my body because I even forget at times. And I then have this fear that comes up, and it's like, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong. Oh my God, like this, like, oh my God, I need to. And I remember I heard this like right before I had booked this trip to Crete, which anyone who knows me, I love Crete. I love Crete. This is my mermaid home. Me and Crete are just like a love affair forever and ever, infinity and beyond. I love swimming in those waters, and those waters are cold, even in summer sometimes, at least for me. And I remember realizing, like, oh no, the first days that I'm there, I'm gonna be in my bleed. I'm gonna have to wait for at least 5 days until I can go into the water because I had just heard this whole like I can't get wet, like the mermaid can't go swim when she's bleeding. And it was just like not just this like fear of I'm gonna fuck something up if I do this again, which, you know, again, I'm not gonna judge my past version of self, but it's like you've done this before, your bleed is still fine. Why not just listen to your body? But it's like in that moment I was like, oh my God, no, I'm gonna fuck something up. And then I literally, I think I held off for like 3 days. I was like, okay, the first 3 days I'm not gonna go in. And then by the end, I was like, I gotta go in. I just gotta go in. But the fear stayed with me for a few cycles where I was literally not listening to myself because and I'm so happy you mentioned that now because I didn't look too much into it. And it makes so much sense. Like I personally, the day before I bleed, I'm so hot. I'm sweating. I'm like, this is too hot for me. And that's how I know my bleed's gonna come. Not every single time before my bleed, but every now and then it's true. And I very rarely have ever used a hot bottle on my womb. I own one. I never think of putting it on. I drink tea, but I also have drunk shakes. Like I think I'm very in the middle. I can go either way. Every cycle has been very different. Sometimes I really don't want cold and I feel very cold too. And sometimes I'm like super fine in the middle. So I think your whole point there is like again, it just comes again to like give yourself the chance to listen to yourself before you listen to someone else's advice and declare that you have some pathology, some symptoms, some problem before you even have it. Because that's my fear-inducing mind that I'm a little bit hypochondriac, I have to say. I'm immediately like, I have this problem before I even have it. I
That's
luck
not your fault, though. It's not
No,
your
no,
fault,
no.
and I don't
I
think
know.
you're
It
alone.
also comes from my father. He was a huge hypochondriac, but and I know it comes from many, many different places, but I know the point is, and luckily, as quickly as I get into it, I also get out, because I have like learned to support myself, to calm myself, calm the fear, right? Like take a moment, breathe, and just be like, okay, wait, like you just heard something, this influenced you, like shake it off. I love shaking. Shaking is number one medicine. Shake it off, twerk it off, right? Like move that womb, let it flow. Because this, like in the end, it's like the title, right? When you said bioindividuality, I was like, exactly, that's the point here. It's That's why I think a lot of these modalities do contradict, and it's okay because two truths can exist at the same time. It's true, probably, right? That there's a cold womb symptoms and like many women need heat. And it's also true that, like you said, some women are gonna be attracted to the fucking cold plunge. Do you? I'm not gonna cold plunge because I just don't like it in general, no matter where I am in my cycle. I've done
Yeah,
it though, but I just don't like it that much. I like room temperature. Could that be a thing?
I love hot.
Hot.
Always.
I just need it to be like balanced. Like in the middle. I like the middle.
The beautiful middle way.
I love the middle way for almost everything, but I know it's not always like fun and sassy and controversial like we
I
like
like lukewarm baths. I lukewarm bath on my period.
I have lukewarm baths and I'm okay.
I don't think anyone could argue against that.
Like I'm
Well,
not ashamed to admit that I have lukewarm baths.
well, I guess the women who said you can't get wet on your period, you can't shower,
Oh,
you just
she
can't touch
kills
water.
me on that one. Oh, yeah, and I even asked like how so I can't be in the shower. She's like, just don't take too long. I was like, have you seen my hair? It takes long. Like, I started panicking in my bleed that I shouldn't take long. And in my bleed, the one thing I love to do the most, and I'm sorry for all the people who are me like, you're wasting water. Yes, I am, okay? The one thing I love to do most in my bleed is literally be in the water, like in the shower, and I feel like I'm being cleansed, and like I love long showers, and
You're a
and
mermaid soul, Naomi. Of
I'm a
course,
mermaid.
you want to
And
be in the
suddenly I was
water.
like, what's going on? It just like it took a part of me. I was like, what? So yeah, I would close off in that by just saying like, how about we open that conversation and we just ask ourselves, is this true for me?
Literally for everything. End of the
For
podcast.
everything.
For
End
everything.
of the podcast. That's all we're saying here.
We're just
Consistent.
saying it in a million different ways.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we need that. I think sometimes we just really need to hear everything again and again in a million different ways. And there's nothing wrong with repetition.
Yeah. So I think we have actually addressed our final myth, which is, do I have to cycle sync? Can I rest? Can I work out? What should I be
Yeah,
doing? Right. I think we've addressed that.
in a
So,
way, but I do have maybe a word or two to add to it. Just
yeah.
maybe like just to remind, because we did address it kind of like in and out in the conversation, but I would bring it to a summary. I'm sure you could too in some words or another. Because of course it's gonna be repetitive. I get it. We're gonna say again, each woman is individual, right? And we need to just find our own structure with it, which changes. It's like I all I wanted to really bring into that is more like going into, as woman and every being, right, men and women have feminine and masculine energy. And what I would say is find that kind of like feminine masculine balance within your cycle, within that structure that you have, where you just it's hard to maybe put in words now, but like to me at least, the masculine is always like more the container. That's the masculine energy for me. It's like this container, what allows the feminine energy to be free, right? And so I feel like the container for us would be that availability to listen, right? And then the feminine feels held and she can kind of like surrender. So I would say, like, throughout our whole cycle, sync to yourself, right? Sync to what's going on within. Like, be that both the feminine and masculine, be your own masculine container that listens so that your feminine can flow and play and feel held, to maybe in follicular take more rest before you start go go go. Maybe in ovulation, yeah, peak, but like save some energy so that in the luteal you're not running on nothing, or whatever works for you. I mean, I know that that's something I'm practicing now, to kind of see how can I keep my energy a bit more like consistent, how can I feel out more also when I really do want to use more energy, and when I like, and not in a I'm gonna plan it way, but in a like intuitively day by day check in kind of way. All I can say though, because I did bring the question of like, do I have to rest or can I work out, is that I practiced different things in different years. There was a time in my life when I was more in my early 20s. I heard that we were not supposed to work out when we're bleeding, and so I stopped. And honestly, that was such a disservice for me. That's not what my body wanted. I like working out. I'm not going to say that on day one, I'm going to go full at it, go on a run, weight lift. But hey, maybe on day 2 or 3, if I feel like it, sure, why not? I feel like that's the goal here. Sync to yourself, sync to your rhythm, like some women are going to need more rest and some women are going to need more rest in one cycle, and the same woman is going to need less rest in the next one. Like it's just so diverse and different. So, like it's again that point of like it's a whole lifetime of listening to our cycles and to our rhythms, because that's the only way we can bring that balance for ourselves and know what we truly need. It's like, again, listening and listening and just balancing the doing and the being. And for some it's gonna be in the luteal phase. Maybe they're still gonna wanna work out, and or not, or it just changes. How receptive can we be to that change? How open, can we be to like respecting also our energy levels, even when it doesn't make sense, even when we're told that we're supposed to be peaking, or when we're told that we're supposed to be super resting, because otherwise we're who knows what. Like Every woman has a different rhythm, and in every phase of her life it changes. So that's all I can say.
Yeah, I think you said everything
Hmm.
that needs to be said.
Yeah.
So I think we can start wrapping up our episode. And before we do that, we did want to invite us listening to think about what would our world look like if the patriarchy could soften into cycles. If it wasn't just us women, females menstruating, who could honor the natural rhythms of our own bodies, but that the men of our communities, our children, our work, right, colleagues could also honor the cycles of our body. And what if our society as a whole could honor cycles, right? What would that look like? What would our world look like? How could that be possible? And how today, right, without this having to dismantle the patriarchy, right, how can we in our day-to-day lives implement practices and small little steps so that we can bring in cycles and welcome in conversations in our romantic partnerships and our work relationships? Right, how can we do that? And I think there's many answers, right? This is more a question than an answer for you, but I'll say my answer. What I believe could be the invitation for women is knowing our own body, right? Not this perfect woman, this perfect female body like we've been addressing this whole episode, but knowing my rhythms, or at least demonstrating some desire to connect with that rhythm and communicating that, right? And I believe that a woman who is rooted in her womb in her own way, right? She knows her womb is able to speak up for it and communicate it, even if she doesn't have all the answers. And even if it's not all figured out, most of the time it's not all figured out, but just communicating what's here and what's now, even if it presents as confusing or chaotic or sensitive or emotional, just communicating what it is from a rooted place and with confidence in it without having to explain or justify or apologize, but just say, I'm bleeding today. So actually, I'm not in the same energy level to talk about this business call on my work break, right? I actually just want to sip my tea. That is staying rooted and grounded in my womb and communicating it and not apologizing for the response. Oh, but right, we have this business call next week. It's really important. No, I'm on my bleed now. And communicating in a way that feels right for us, right? Some women will communicate in a more fiery way. Some women will communicate in a more watery way. That's up to you, right? But just communicating it and feeling confident in it and navigating the projection. I know it's hard to navigate the projection, but it's actually not normal to plan your whole life around your bleed. Yeah, that's not normal because that's not how our society is built to run around, but also look at all the things that are happening in our world that are out of harmony. Maybe actually our world would be completely different if we honored cycles and we held space for females, for women to be in natural rhythms, and not just females, right? Men as well, right? They also depend on some degree of natural cycles and rhythms. We also project onto men this linearity and constancy, which I'm not 100% sure is the truth, right? I believe that men would also benefit from natural rhythms and cycles as well, being more implemented into our workspaces, into our home life. So,
Question. That's a
yeah,
good question.
yeah.
Yeah.
So stating our womb's needs and capacities, energetic capacities, and prioritizing that. It's so easy to know for myself, oh, I'm actually really tired on my womb. I'm really tired because I'm bleeding today. Ugh, but I scheduled that appointment at the dentist, so I have to go, right? And it can be hard to say, actually, I'm just going to cancel and deal with the consequences after because I need to prioritize my body's needs right now. It's not easy.
Yeah, of course, but and I agree. And then how we also been addressing that might also not always be the truth, right? It might be that we're also very much told that we are always going to be tired on that first day and we don't need to be seeing anyone and what, and
No,
maybe
of
some,
course. That's been what we've been talking about.
right? We've been talking about that all the time. And yeah, I think in the end, it just comes down to the remembrance of our rhythm and listening to our womb and our wisdom that's there for us.
And I
Like you
think
said,
also having
mm,
spaces to communicate it, to have conversation about it, because it's often something we keep within ourselves, right? I know that I'm on my bleed and I know that this is what I'm feeling, but the actual space for conversation can make it difficult because there's often projections that are put
yeah,
back.
fear of projection. There's also sometimes not fear of projection, but just this like, I don't want to have to explain myself, right? You touched on this almost like I would call it a, like no pleases, just thank yous. Like I don't want to have to explain myself or share these vulnerable things. Like I guess it would be easier, of course, to be able to not have to share, right? To not have to be fully like responsible for communicating if it were more implemented into just any system where it's like a woman can easily, a bleeding woman can easily just, I don't know, like give a heads up. I guess it's difficult, right? Because some women might not know when they're gonna bleed, but like that it would be justified that if they suddenly go, I'm not coming to work for the next 3, 4 days, 5 days, whatever each cycle is also different length, then it's just justified because it's like, of course, like that if that were implemented, like that's the break. You get you get a womb cycle break or whatever. But you
Yeah.
know, at the end of the day, I think the solutions we want to bring are like the ones that are possible now, because maybe that's a far stretch. Maybe we're not there yet as a society, as a collective, right? In those spaces that are more, I don't know if to call them patriarchal or just more, testosterone dominant, let's say, it's it's different, it's something that I believe will take time. And on one hand, it's beautiful to bring the topic of like this needs to be communicated because there needs to be a capacity to talk about it, that it's not taboo, that it's brought up, that there is just more awareness around it. Like I would have answered partner supporting bleeding women and like caring for them, and just like marking all of these transitions of like womanhood, cronehood, the grief, the like new chapters in life, right? Like motherhood, all of those as ceremonial, all of those as being welcome as like, wow, this is a rite of passage, this is a blessing, this is beautiful, like the feminine and having, like I said before, there's this structure, there's this container that allows it to flow so that it can just be like, that would be my ideal. And yet sometimes we have to like, right, bring it back a bit and say, okay, how can we get there? But also, would it be okay if a woman doesn't want to carry the weight of what it means to, like, is that another have to should of like, I have to now communicate and express this because otherwise it's not going to change? Like, is that whole weight, right, on one more, like what if she just wants to keep her private, because that's a very intimate private detail of her life, right? What if she just doesn't want to share it? What if she doesn't want to have to be exposed? Because, right, it could be, of course, the question of, well, are you afraid of receiving projection? But it could also be like, what about being tired of receiving projection and just wanting to also have your personal life personal, and not be having this weight of like, if I don't communicate this, nothing's ever gonna change. Like, I don't know. I wonder about that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of perspectives. And before we even recorded this call, we were kind of like debating, well, is it a systems change? Is it an internal belief change? Like what is the solution? And I think there is no one solution. I think there's infinite solutions. But I think within relationships, within businesses, within work life, right, there are more spaces available to honor the cycles and not just menstrual cycles, right? There are so many cycles that we are surrounded by that go beyond the female body's menstrual ovarian cycle, right? The seasons of nature, the seasons and cycles of our agriculture, just
Just
nature
living
in
in
general.
ritual, right? Just living in ritual, giving space to and living in ritual doesn't have to be a huge new agey shamanic like huge thing, right? A ceremony, it's can sometimes be just very internal. It's internally lived. It's just giving it like acknowledgement. That to me is already ritualistic. That's
Yeah.
already ceremonial. I'm seeing it, I'm giving it the space and the importance. I'm giving it like that like sense of the weight it carries back, right? Like this remembrance.
Yeah, and I think you don't have to be a bleeding woman to want rest or to need to communicate rest. And I think what we're talking about is actually even bigger than just,
Bleeding or not.
menstrual cycles, but it's just our society's inability to honor rest and replenishment and nourishment,
And
right?
the way, right? It is a topic, right? Just there's not just mass, like there's that balance, like coming that play, you know. I think both energies are beautiful. I think both are necessary in this world. It's not just one or the other. So, I mean, that's a whole other topic, girl. We need to we need to cut
Yes.
this what this conversation needs to come to a close at some point, but it's just so
So,
rich, right? It's just so rich.
so we leave you with that question, right? How in my life can I not just live in my cyclical nature, but also communicate it and live within an ecosystem of cyclical nature in my community around me? And
In a
what
way
are the
that
practical ways that I can implement that will support me and nourish me?
that's beautiful. And I think we both want to say just like take what resonates from this conversation today, leave what doesn't, and you know, just come back to your womb, your rhythm, your remembrance again and again. And yeah, we really came here to share from our personal experiences. These are our thoughts, our beliefs, and each of one is entitled to their own because that's what happens in life, right? We have our experiences and that shapes us, and we're open, right, to hearing each other's stories, to everyone knowing that everyone's going to have their experience and their lived truth and reality. And so there's never just this one truth.
And we can't
And
speak for everybody or tiptoe around everybody's experience or beliefs or triggers. And so we come here always in authenticity to speak from what we know, but we aren't the holders of absolute truth. And
we believe in the power of stories, of sharing, right? Like we said in the beginning, listening sometimes to other women's story, like it'll spark something. It'll either resonate or maybe not, or it'll remind you of something, or it'll connect you with yourself in some way. It'll give you maybe that validation, that permission, whatever it is, or that resonance, that feeling of like, ah, yes, I'm not alone, right? Whatever it is. And it is what it is.
it is what it is. So thank you so much for joining us in the second episode. It was way longer than what we had initially
And we
anticipated.
anticipated.
It is what it is. We love it. So thank you if you came all the way through with us, and we'll see you in our next episode.
Mwah. Ciao,
Yalla.
ciao. Yeah.